I want to examine medical marijuana and actually marijuana use that has been in this country for quite some number of years. This is an excellent portrayal of the 1776 Minuteman and the marijuana leaf. And actually, there are some purported to propose that we should have had medical freedoms actually put forth right in our Constitution. Now, this may just be a rumor, but I sure like the quotes. And this is supposedly attributed to Dr. Benjamin Rush, founding father of the United States and signer of the Declaration of Independence. Now, this actually may, in fact, be an internet rumor that's been repeated so many times that it has, in effect, become true, because I've heard references stating that this has not actually attributable to him and that he was not a good person. But I've also read other things about Dr. Benjamin Rush, that he was against slavery. He wanted to abolish slavery, and he wanted to abolish capital punishment. But he also considered that excessive patriotism was considered a mental disorder, and people should be treated for having excess patriotism. So I'm not sure about this guy, but I do like the quotes, whether they are his or not. It's one of those things that's on the internet, maybe not well known though. But this is according to Dr. Benjamin Rush, supposedly. Unless we put medical freedom into the Constitution, the time will come when medicine will organize into an undercover dictatorship to restrict the art of healing to one class of men and deny equal privileges to others. The Constitution of the Republic should make a special privilege for medical freedoms as well as religious freedom. Quite interesting. And there's another similar quote. Similar, but not exactly the same. Unless we put medical freedom into the Constitution, the time will come when medicine will organize itself into an undercover dictatorship to restrict the art of healing to doctors and deny equal privileges to others will constitute the Bastille of medical science. All such laws are un-American and despotic. If it's attributable to him or not, I don't know, but I like the quote. That's what I got to say. I like it. It may not be something he actually stated. So, I've heard too much one way or the other, so I'm not 110% sure. But I do like the quote. I want to point out something else. Now, this is about the Prohibition years. The Prohibition years, in other words, against prohibition of alcohol, the mass sale and manufacture of alcohol, actually there was a big rise in marijuana use and marijuana black marketing. To check the migration towards the drugs, Congress passed the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937, modeled closely after the Harrison Act. Now, I want to examine this Harrison Act in Harrison. Now, just to, get a little more detail on the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937. Actually, at this time, there came into existence an invention that was akin to the marijuana hemp plant, or actually the industrial hemp plant, as the Eli Whitney developed cotton gin was to cotton. In other words, they'd be able to produce the hemp fibers from the plant very fast. So they developed a machine that could do this back at this time, 1937, 1938, around this time. 1937, I believe it was, same year that this law was passed. And all of a sudden, that made hemp to be a major threat to the oil industry, because hemp could be used for fuel. It could also be used for either diesel fuel or gasoline. And it could be used to replace steels and plastics, which was against the plastics were used in by the chemical industry, and it also would be able to replace a lot of the paper pulp coming from trees, since the hemp product could be produced quickly from this new machine that just came out in 1937 from the plant itself. So William Randolph Hearst was one of the people that was a major proponent of making hemp illegal. So basically how they made it illegal was to tax it. They taxed it. They had to have a tax stamp to grow it. which I imagine was very expensive because it actually stopped the production of hemp in this country to a great extent until the Japanese took over some of the hemp supplies that were in the Southwest Pacific, and then they had to grow it for the war effort, specifically in the United States. Now, the assault on marijuana was led by Harry Anslinger, the indefatigable U.S. Commissioner of Narcotics, who served a Hoover-like stretch from 1930 to 1962. This guy was a fascist dictator to the max. At one point, Anslinger announced that marijuana was be taken by professional musicians. And he goes, quote unquote, I'm not speaking about good musicians, he clarified, but the jazz type. Oh. Well, it's nice to, examine some of these things that have been said why marijuana should have been illegal. Now, I'm not even talking about recreational use. I'm a proponent of medicinal marijuana oil. Now, if there's a great fear that recreational use is extremely bad, actually, I would compromise. I don't do any of that stuff, but I don't like anybody's freedoms being restricted. But I would think it would be a great compromise if they can grow the marijuana plant in greenhouses that were protected and harvest the product and make marijuana oil by the ton every year and distribute it to people as medicine. I would think that would be a great thing versus, some people smoking it. But I don't have anything against people smoking it either, even though I don't do it at all. So, but anyway, maybe I'm just too liberal. But, the way I look at it, if people can do what the hell they want, that's the way I look at things, It's like you can't restrict stupidity if they want to do something stupid. If somebody wants to argue that smoking marijuana is stupid, well, it's not extremely harmful, quite obviously. No matter how you argue for something, anything in excess is harmful. How's that? So, whatever. And that just goes to the person. So, that's the way I look at it. But I want to also examine this Harrison Act and who Harrison was, because this Marijuana Tax Act of 1937 was modeled closely after the Harrison Act. Now, here's Francis Burton Harrison, right? Born 1873 and lived to 1957, right? Now, I'm just going to point out one fact because I think this pretty much states all of it. Maybe I'm being too skewed by saying this. But Harrison graduated from Yale University in 1895, where he was a member of the secret society Skull and Bones, and from New York Law School in 1897. Now, this is straight off of Wikipedia, and they mentioned that Harrison was a secret society member of the Skull and Bones. So, I think pretty much any policy this guy is for is probably evil. So remember that the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937 was based upon the Harrison Act that was done decades prior. Now, let's examine what the Harrison Act is. The Harrison Narcotics Act, right, which was approved on December 14th, 1914. Now, you notice during this time, there's been a hell of a lot of stuff going on. You had the Federal Reserve in 1913, the creation of the IRS. You had the Rockefellers examining the medical establishment, or creating the medical establishment, examining like all the medical, the way things were taught in schools, and basically telling everybody in the future with their studies how things will be taught in medical colleges. All during this time. And right after that, World War I starts. And there's plenty of proponents back at this time trying to fight this stuff, fight Standard Oil and everything else. So, but I think you got to be smarter. And this is like Harrison talking about the Harrison Act, like when they're just regulating basically opiates and various things that were coming into the country. Harrison stated, "We are not attempting to collect revenue, but regulate commerce." That I found to be a really, on the surface, I mean, I'd almost laugh at that statement. If somebody made that statement today, they would tear him up in a second flat. you know. But they come out with better statements today. I guess that's the deal. They get smarter on the other side. But I just want to point out the drafters of the Harrison Act, how they played this out, because it goes to show you how screwed up these people were and how this would play out today. It just sure wouldn't. The drafters of the Harrison Act played on fears of drug-crazed, sex-mad Negroes. It made references to Negroes under the influence of drugs murdering whites, degenerate Mexicans smoking marijuana, and Chinamen seducing white women with drugs. Dr. Hamilton Wright testified at a hearing for the Harrison Act. Wright alleged that drugs made blacks uncontrollable, gave them superhuman powers, and caused them to rebel against white authority. So, these were the arguments for the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act of 1914, which was the basis and the model for the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937. And they used the same type of stupid arguments to pass that damn 1937 law. So, I think it's time to repeal this garbage. It's beyond belief. And, you know, people need to be educated about what our real freedoms are. And I'm not 100% sure about this Dr. Benjamin Rush, if this is his quote. But let me put it this way. I like the idea of medical freedom in the United States. People willing, absolutely having a choice to choose what type of medicines they can take. And also to repeal the prohibition of growing marijuana for medical use. It's proven to be a major healer. Since the 1800s all the way up to 1937 when they passed that marijuana tax law, it's been one of the major prescription drugs given to people for a number of ailments, and it has worked beautifully. So it's time to get our medical freedoms back and show exactly what type of idiocy was actually behind these laws and the reasons they stated why these should be good laws. It was purely like they're playing upon, they were using racists to enforce these laws, basically. That's what they were doing. That's what they were doing. And they have no basis of any type of logic or merit. So it is time to get back to our actual medical freedoms. I don't know if Dr. Benjamin Rush actually stated those quotes. I kind of like them. There's actually some controversy if he did or didn't, but I like the idea behind it. And I believe this symbology with the middleman next to the marijuana leaf is good symbology. It's nothing about drugs. It's about freedom to use the plant, the plants that we used that for thousands of years as the human race to our best benefit, for medicine, to replace plastics, to use for food, to use for fuel, and a number of other materials. It's a worthy cause, and it needs to be pushed into people's face exactly how these stupid laws came about in the first place.